Hello Internet, Taliesin here, and if you're here, then I've got a feeling you're going to be part of a select few, because today we are talking CROSSROADS, the new Rise of Azshara cinematic that isn't really very new at all, because it came out over a week ago now. Everyone else has already talked about it, and what it might mean for the game going forward. If I was a savvy YouTuber, I wouldn't be making this video at all, because we totally missed the hype train on this one, because last week I was like, yeah, you know what, I'm just going to play the game that I really like and take it all in properly. So I was kind of resigned to not doing a deep dive cinematic analysis on CROSSROADS at all, but then I thought, I really like doing these deep dives, and it is a really good cinematic, and the talking points it brings up and the hints it gives as to what might be coming in 8.2 and 9.0 are super tantalizing and something we are all discussing and speculating on anyway, and I thought, oh, go on then. So here we are, and the usual disclaimer, this is not a reaction video. Obviously, I've watched this cinematic loads of times, but if somehow you haven't, then this is going to be a really terrible way of doing so, okay? Because we're going to be stopping and starting and talking all over the top of it and just generally having a proper real geek out about everything, because CROSSROADS is very much what I would describe as one of the new wave of Warcraft cinematics. I would say started back in Legion with the 7.2 cinematics, but really became a thing with the return to Argus. Cinematics that didn't have to portray an intense moment of action or introduce a new baddie, but were confident enough just to show us two characters that we already knew having a conversation about something important. And in my humble opinion, it's these types of cinematics that have really elevated WoW films onto a different plane of awesome, and CROSSROADS is an outstanding example of that. So join us as we talk rescuing Baine, uniting the Horde and Alliance, Sylvanas' plan, and the fate of Thunderbluff in 8.3, okay? Go, 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 go. What? Wait, no, who? Why? What's going on? Okay, do we need a quick history lesson to learn how we actually got here? Yeah, I think we do, don't we? So, in 8.2, Horde players are warned by Spirit Walker Usso that Baine Bloodhoof, leader of the Tauren, and now proper factory farm cow since Sylvanas took him prisoner because he helped return Derek Proudmoore to his family, because Sylvanas raised him against his will to use as a weapon, because she honestly just doesn't give a shit these days, Baine is due to be executed in the morning, and Lorthemar decides the time has finally come to go behind his war chief's back and launch a rescue mission. This pointy-eared traitor, who, by the way, in this whole scenario appears to be using his Waluigi voice that we thought had been purged completely at this point.
We have to stop this.
And that breaks my heart, but it's not what this video is about. Tells the player that it turns out he is totally in contact with a couple of other dirty traitors and that we should totally go and meet them in Orgrimmar and all be traitors together. So, you know, obviously, off we pop to find those two dirty traitors, Saurfang and Thrall. Oh, and Rokhan too, because apparently everyone is now a traitor. Great. Meanwhile, Alliance players, yeah, I've done them both, there's a reason this video didn't come out instantly, are called to Stormwind Throne Room, where Anduin says that his spy master has informed him that Baine is to be executed. And since the cow and the boy king have been bezies ever since Baine slipped Anduin part of his horn, and yes, I'm sorry, but there really isn't any other way to say this, that's what happened, the Alliance leader orders a rescue attempt of his own, sending Jaina and Shaw and you, Alliance player, into Orgrimmar to break the young bull free. Along the way, those two rescue missions bump into each other and, warily, decide that Baine's best hope lies in them working together to free him with the power of friendship. Very wary friendship. Which results in a really cool fight against Magister Hatharal, who has been popping up regularly since Wrath of the Lich King and is here for his revenge on Jaina after the Purge of Dalaran. And yes, at last someone is mentioning the Purge of Dalaran. Thank you, Hatharal. But I'm afraid that's not what this video is about either, so bye, Hatharal. We beat him, although he survives the fight in an ice block, and Jaina teleports everyone to safety. It's a genuinely brilliant scenario, fair play. And now that you know what's going on, this is where we begin. This establishing shot of Thunderbluff becomes much more interesting with the hindsight of the rest of the cinematic, and as you may have noticed from the title of this video, by the time all this is said and done, there are some serious concerns for the future safety of the Tauran capital, and knowing that, this view of the city, which we kind of descend into, much like the trouble we bring with us, might soon be bearing down onto Thunderbluff, and bathed in the fiery red light of sunset, takes on a whole new meaning. Far from this being a beautiful and comforting look at the safety of home after the rescue attempt, it becomes almost an ominous premonition of how the city might appear if Sylvanas comes to extract her revenge. You can easily imagine this shot recreated further down the line, the war chief standing on this exact overlook silhouetted against the burning city. The musical motif here is the Saurfang theme that we've had established in those super high definition cinematics, and as our heroes, or dirty traitors depending on your point of view, port into the scene, Jaina breaks away from the group to regard Thunderbluff. When Magatha poisoned Baine's father, Cairn, and took control of Thunderbluff, it was to Theramore, to Jaina, that Baine fled to find safety. Theramore is of course gone now, destroyed by an atrocious war chief. Is Jaina perhaps looking at the city here and wondering whether she has it in her to stop the same thing happening in Mulgore? But this really is a cinematic about returning Square Boy Thrall, and something I really love about the whole situation here is, much more than even in Safe Haven, Thrall is incredibly vulnerable and reticent in this cinematic, having been thrust back into the thick of the action despite his own wishes by Saurfang, and now reunited with his old estranged friend Jaina. As the dust settles on this rescue, he's clearly at a bit of a loss as to what he's supposed to do next, and it's Saurfang, who I think we forget sometimes is more than old enough to be Thrall's father, gives him an encouraging fatherly nod to go and sort this shit out. Partly, of course, out of concern for his old war chief, certainly, but also, you suspect, because he knows they're going to need all of the allies they can get in the fight to come. And as Thrall steels himself and turns to face this moment that he's been dreading, he walks to literally join Jaina on the edge of the precipice, which is of course the last time they were together. Quick history lesson: Thrall and Jaina were incredibly close philosophically and as friends before Garrosh's destruction of Theramore made her question and flat out reject her life's work in a way, the strive for peace between the two factions, and headed to Orgrimmar with the focusing iris to drown the Horde capital in a huge tidal wave. When Jaina found herself on the edge that time, it was Thrall who held her back long enough for Kalagos to talk her down, with Jaina eventually relenting but admitting that it would be a long, long time, if ever, before she could call Thrall a friend again. And in more recent times, we've seen a reverse of that. While Jaina has now worked through her demons and found something regarding peace through reconnecting with her family, Thrall has been disillusioned with the choices he's made, losing his connection with the elements, giving away the Doom Hammer to, well, me, and going all rustic farmer guy in Nagran to find himself. And of course, as far as everyone in this scene is concerned, the Horde itself is also on the very brink of this metaphorical precipice, teetering on the edge of everything it's supposed to stand for and represent, and how well or not this exchange goes could help decide whether the faction regains its footing or falls, which is why it's fitting and effective that we have these representatives of Horde and Alliance watching on nervously, because their fates are all entwined in what happens next. And now we get to the real meat of this scene, what is genuinely a touching exchange between Jaina and Thrall, and it's helped by yet another really elegantly efficient script, which I'm guessing is by Christy Golden. I think she does these really well, but also two stellar performances from Chris Metzen and Laura Bailey. Terran Gregory recently tweeted a photo of their day in Blizzard's vocal studio recording this scene, a studio I've stood in, but they wouldn't let me record anything, not even like one word, which to be honest I think is their loss. But these guys have all worked together for well over a decade now. They clearly have an IRL bond, and I think that's apparent in this scene because it's so effective. I love that the exchange starts with this sad sigh from Thrall. If you watch a lot of these videos, then you know that Velen's sigh at the end of Legion is one of my favourite moments in WoW, full stop. This dignified exhalation of relief as the weight of 10,000 years of running and being responsible for the plight and safety of his people is lifted with the binding of Sargeras by the Pantheon. This sigh is kind of the opposite. Thrall is preparing himself for Jaina to turn around and tell him to piss off. That's essentially what happened last time at Orgrimmar. And because this is only the start of what will be a long and difficult journey for everyone. There is no relief in this sigh, no weight being lifted. Thrall is still carrying all his doubts and guilt and concerns squarely on his big, square shoulders. And in fact, he's right to be wary, because Jaina is still being, well, if not frosty, pardon the pun, then at the very least guarded.
Thank you. Baine would have died without your aid.
I couldn't let that happen.
Not looking him in the eye, replying curtly to his thanks, almost saying the words more to herself than to her old friend. But then Thrall continues to list off all of the things that he regrets, and we get a glimpse at these things that have been torturing him all of these years.
Nor could I. I refuse to fail him, like I failed his father.
He says that he failed Cairn when he really didn't. The Old Tauren Chief's death had precisely nothing to do with Thrall, but it turns out that he's been carrying that guilt all this time. And as Thrall, the chosen one, don't forget, Green Jesus, he who can do no wrong, goes on to expand on all of those things that he wishes that he could undo.
I wish I could change it all. Cairn, Garrosh, Theramore.
When he mentions Theramore, this is when Jaina's look finally softens. This is the acknowledgement of guilt over the destruction of her home that she's been waiting to hear from Thrall since it happened. But in this moment, she realises that actually she didn't need to hear it from him. She's found her peace, and it suddenly pains her to realise that Thrall hasn't.
Sometimes it feels like I did everything wrong.
It's almost like this moment of candid, naked vulnerability makes her finally realise something about herself too.
We all have blood on our hands.
And Jaina definitely does. As our friend Hathoral reminded us earlier, she doesn't hold quite the moral high ground on this, as her years of anger at Thrall may have convinced her that she did. And now that in BFA she has found that peace with her family, she can finally accept this uncomfortable truth about herself. Just a little side note here, but I love how unwhite Jaina's teeth are. I mean, she's still perfect and wonderful, obviously, but on stream we did the numbers and we worked out that Jaina is exactly the same age as me. And I like that she doesn't have video game super white teeth. It's only a little thing, but I like it. Anyway, the next lines are very important.
And now, Sylvanas will come. Thunderbluff will burn. Just like Teldrassil.
Because it is no mistake that this is very reminiscent of the scene from Old Soldier where Sylvanas stands in the same sort of light watching Teldrassil burn, and Saurfang says,
"They will come for us now. All of them!"
And in that case, he was absolutely right about the Alliance coming for them, because the next thing that happened was the Siege of Lordaeron, and as the orange light from the setting sun again makes us think of what happens to cities that Sylvanas has a grudge against, we are encouraged to take Thrall's words as being just as prophetic. Sylvanas will come, and Thunderbluff will burn.
Once before, you and I stood side by side on the slopes of Mount Hyjal. That world tree did not fall, because the Horde and the Alliance worked together.
And then something that shouldn't work, because it should be too cheesy, the literal representation of the Horde and Alliance working together to help the Taurens stand strong as Shaw and Saurfang haul Baine onto his feet. It shouldn't work, but it does, for the exact same reason so many of these cinematics ascend what they should be, which is just shiny cutscenes in a video game. Because when Jaina talks about how they stood side by side at Mount Hyjal, these characters have such a wealth of shared history and experience, not just with each other, but with us. We've known them for almost 20 years. It's us that Jaina is reminding of this proud history as much as Thrall. Shit, video games are awesome. And evoking the past like that, of course, makes us remember the foundations that Thrall's Horde were supposed to be built on, the honour that these characters all feel Sylvanas' Horde has abandoned. But then, the money shot.
Horde, Alliance. We've come to this crossroad again and again, Jaina. It always falls apart. What's different this time?
We are.
And that is such a typical Christie Golden zinger right there. And the hope that this idea instantly instills, that finally Jaina and Thrall are at a point where they have seen enough, suffered enough, and healed enough that they can do it right this time. More on that later. And this gentle touch on the arm, which, okay, definitely would be a whole lot more gentle if Jaina wasn't wearing a literal plate armor gauntlet with spiky metal fingers, but which was still enough to send the internet into meltdown because she touched him! Jaina touched him! And as we all know, if a girl touches your arm, that definitely means she's in love with you and totally wants your Doomhammer. But unfortunately, no, that's just not how male-female friendships work. This is an important moment because it is literally Jaina reaching out and re-establishing a connection and friendship with Thrall that she herself had cut off at the drowning of Orgrimmar. She doesn't want to bone Thrall. I mean, obviously she does, because seriously, who wouldn't? Look at this beautiful square boy, but not really. Jaina has held Thrall and Agra's baby, for goodness sake. This is the first step towards rebuilding that trust and closeness and shared purpose that they always had before. And this moment of tenderness, of generosity from Jaina towards her old friend breaks through Thrall's self-built wall of guilt and loneliness and gives him hope too, for the Horde obviously, but also for himself. And suddenly the light of the sunset that these characters are bathed in might not have to represent the future burning of a city, but instead the end of a chapter. The sun setting on this saddest of times and preparing for a new dawn of Horde and Alliance working together. But of course, before the dawn comes the night, and no one is under any illusions about the danger that they are in or the trouble that's about to kick off. There is work to be done and they can't all stand around singing Kumbaya.
I should go. Anduin will want to know that Baine is safe.
I love this bit where instead of talking, Baine just thumps his chest and bows. Me and Evie have this game that we play when we watch shows on TV. It's called the Don't Talk, We Can't Afford It game. Whenever a main character in a show says something to an extra, and really that extra should say something back, like, thanks doctor, or bye, or hello, they don't say anything, because if they did, that's a speaking part right there, and you have to pay the actor 3 times as much. And when Baine did this, without talking or thanking the person who just saved his life, we both just shouted at the screen, don't talk, we can't afford it. But Saurfang gets a line though.
Tell your king he is not alone.
And of course this is a glorious, very delayed reply to what Anduin says in Lost Honor, when Anduin allows Saurfang's escape from Stormwind stockades and started this whole rebellion ball rolling in the first place.
I hoped you would stop her.
I can't. Not alone.
It's Saurfang saying, yes, we are on the same side here, let's do this. And so Jaina, smiling, relieved, hopeful, ports back to well, Nazjatar as it turns out, but you assume eventually to tell her king about the new alliance. And when I say alliance, I mean obviously the alliance between the Alliance and the Horde rebels. And the characters in this cinematic aren't the only ones that seem up for it. Genn and Chandris are pretty wary at first, but appreciate the more pressing need of defeating Shara, so agree to the uneasy truce. Lorthemar and Thalyssra, though, seem much more open to the idea of laying off the alliance, but this is still a fragile piece that they're essentially having to keep a secret from their own war chief. And I know what you're thinking, because it's been the title of almost every video made on this subject since the cinematic came out. Does this mean the end of Horde and Alliance? Does this mean the next expansion, 9.0, will see the end of the faction rivalry which this game is based on and mix us all together in one glorious whole? No, I don't think so, no. Because it's true that after years of emo soul searching, Thrall and Jaina might finally be ready to make the peace that they sometimes strive for, sometimes didn't, a reality. But do you know what Thrall and Jaina have in common above anything else? They aren't leaders of their factions. At the end of the day, much as I love them, and I do, what they want isn't really important, is it? Sylvanas is certainly having none of it, and Anduin may be willing to work with the Horde rebellion for his own ends, but he's already explicitly stated now that he believes Sylvanas is beyond reason, and flat out defeating her is the only option. And we've been saying since before this expansion even began that a fundamental change in the way that factions worked had to be coming at the conclusion of the Ultimate Faction War expansion, because otherwise, why would you bother? And I totally see why an end to Horde and Alliance would capture people's imaginations. If there were no more factions, PvP queues would be much shorter, there wouldn't be the stupid faction imbalance when it comes to raiding that we have now, you wouldn't be splitting in half a player base which is inevitably smaller than it was 10 years ago. You wouldn't have to keep thinking of new reasons as to why the factions hate each other again every expansion. It would certainly seem to solve plenty of issues, but come on, can you really see an end to the Alliance and Horde battle that has been at the very heart of the Warcraft franchise since forever? Because I can't. It would just be too monumental, too wasteful in a way. Having said that, I stand by my prediction that we will see some change, whether that be a third faction of some kind, or maybe some more existing races having a choice of which faction they join, like Pandaren do. Maybe Blood Elves will have a choice, or humans. Or, and I like this the best, a sort of sub-faction idea, where Horde and Alliance exist as normal, but there's some kind of Scryer Aldor situation exists, where you can work towards building your reputation with another group. Maybe, oh I don't know, the Light and the Void. So if you are, say, an Alliance warrior with high Light rep, then you can choose to team up with other Alliance as normal, whichever sub-faction they chose, or Horde characters that also chose to follow the Light, opening out the factions while still keeping a divide. Or maybe something else completely different which I haven't thought of, but I think there will surely be something, right? Surely, right? Which just leaves us with the question of Sylvanas. With Lorthemar explicitly saying that peace is necessary, with only Sylvanas standing in the way of it, and spoiler, but after the raid, everyone else saying very similar, it does certainly seem like we are another step down the road of Sylvanas as Garrosh 2.0, doesn't it? Shit, all these race leaders that we've seen in these events are literally talking about confronting Sylvanas at Orgrimmar, like sieging Orgrimmar? But this idea of an attack on Thunderbluff throws a spanner into the works, because if Sylvanas does attack the Tauran capital, as Thrall suggests she will, then that town is going to need protecting, and Siege of Orgrimmar 2.0 is going to have to wait. So, is 8.3 going to be the Battle of Thunderbluff? Will we see the whole of Mulgore become a war front? It's certainly a big and open enough space for it. Is all the N'Zoth stuff that we're expecting going to turn out to be a big bait and switch, only to nope out and see the final battle between Sylvanas and, well, everyone else across the plains of the Cow People? Will Thunderbluff just burn? Well, here's an interesting theory. I know I just said I don't think they'll get rid of the two factions in 9.0, but if they were going to do that, then Blizzard might feasibly want to reduce the overall number of capital cities in the game, right? Like, maybe burn Darnassus, perhaps cover, I don't know, Undercity in Blight. Thunderbluff would be the third. Shit, maybe we are losing Horde and Alliance after all. Well, what about this? What if the Alliance and Thrall's Rebellion are so determined to protect Thunderbluff that they send troops there to protect it? What if they send too many troops, leaving their forces stretched too thin over too many different fronts? If Anduin, in his naive, inexperienced way, has troops stationed in Kultiras, Zandalar, Nazjatar, and Thunderbluff, what if that leaves the Alliance short-handed in Stormwind? And what if that was Sylvanas' plan all along? She clearly states it as her objective at the beginning of Before the Storm. What if her plan never changed, and this is all working exactly as she meant it to? What if in 8.3, instead of the Siege of Orgrimmar 2.0, instead of the burning of Thunderbluff, what if we need to get ready for the Battle of Stormwind. What do you think, guys? Are you pleased to see old friends allying up once more, or do you think these old timers need to be wiped out by the true war chief like the traitorous dogs they are? What do you think Sylvanas' plan is in all of this? What do you think this means for the future of the factions, and what hints do you think it gives for the inevitable 8.3? I love this kind of shit, so please let us know in the comments below. And thanks for joining us today. I know we missed the hype on this one. I'm actually quite glad now that we took our time to gather our thoughts on it and make this video as good as it could be, so thanks for your patience. If you enjoyed this, don't thank us. Thank our patrons who give their actual real-life money to make all of our videos happen, as always. If you didn't like it, downvote the shit out of it. Remember, my name is Coltrane at Azeroth Public Radio. No, my name is Taliesin from me and Evitel. Until next time, cheerio.